Hey everybody, we are going into chapter 12 of Vertical Marriage today, and the title of it is A Fruitful Investment. Premarital counseling is one of our favorite activities. We rejoice with couples that have found their life partner, and oftentimes it's been a long process, and so we rejoice when they reach that goal of like really feeling good in their heart and soul that I think this is the one. Our paradigms are kind of lined up, our core values, and doing life together it just excites us, just the thought of it. And we rejoice with couples. And what makes it so special for us is that we get to reflect upon how we went through that process as well. Way back when we met, 1980, got married 1981, and we went through the same process, of finding one another and making the choice, yes, I think this is the one, similar view on life and similar goals. And wow, it's been wonderful as we're, as I'm taping this today, we are nearing, pretty soon we'll be hitting our 40th year. Another year or so, we'll hit year 40 of being married, and we look back upon all of our life and our walking with God, and we've realized this, and this is the first concept I want to kind of kick off this session with. As far as being fruitful, it's all about really bearing fruit in life. We want to enjoy life, of course, have fun in all kinds of ways, but bearing fruit is so essential. And here's the principle that we basically learned and still are learning, that every fruitful field of our married life has been the result of sowing seed. Every fruitful field of our married life has been the result of sowing seed. And so we realize in the beginning, the wedding gets lots of attention, finding a venue and getting everything set up and preparing for the wedding, and that all has its place. But our desire when we see young couples or not young couples, but couples that are getting married, it's building a foundation, helping them to build the foundation for a lifelong godly marriage. And we are thinking of the harvest that's going to come through that couple, the fruitfulness of their lives. And we discovered it for our own lives. And it's not just with family, though, that family is paramount. With 3 lovely children that we have, and now we're seeing, grandchildren coming along, and the harvest that comes in life, and you get to be a part of it. And even in our own lives, my own growth as a man, Anne's growth as a Christian woman, that's a harvest that we're seeing in our lives. And so we live for that. We live to see fruitfulness coming forth from our lives. And so there's a cycle that comes. There's a cycle of harvest. There's a time for plowing, there's a time for planting, watering, waiting. And so discerning the cycles of life, or the cycles of harvest, as I'll call it, is really, really important. So here's another principle. The principle is based in Psalm 126. Those who go out weeping, carrying seed to sow, will return with songs of joy, carrying sheaves with them. So this psalm is in the context of Israel being in captivity, but then they're returning eventually to the land, and with songs of joy. And we've seen this kind of principle applied where when you feel like you're in a time of captivity, if you will, or wilderness or testing or drought in your life, and you don't feel like you have a whole lot to sow, maybe very little seed to sow, but you sow it anyway. And the principle is this, that when you carry seed, you will also carry sheaves. So the principle is carrying seed carrying sheaves of harvest. To say it another way, when you sow, you reap. So sowing and reaping is just, you know, it manifests in our lives basically really every day. And so in the marriage relationship, there are opportunities to sow and to reap on a regular basis. And, you know, oftentimes in the relationship early on, there seems to be the quick investment, quick return principle at work. You know, the first date, the first few dates, celebrating your 1 month anniversary. We've been dating for 3 months. We've been together for a year. And it's like you're reaping at a rapid pace, quick investment, quick return. This is great. You know, there's the fruit on the trees and all different kinds of ways you're enjoying life. You're living in harvest. It's amazing. And that seems to be kind of the norm, you know, before marriage. But then when you get married, it kind of turns into more of what I call a selfless pouring in and then waiting. So it's not always quick investment, quick return, quick sowing, reaping. It's just making the choice, making that 1 Corinthians 13, what love's all about, making that choice to serve and to lay down your life for that spouse, you know, throughout the years, throughout the decades of a marriage. And then it becomes sometimes it becomes long investment, long return. You don't see things right away all the time because you're both, you know, changing as people and growing as people. And there's a few hiccups along the way that you have to navigate. And so there's a really very deep correlation between the style of your discipleship and the style of your relating in marriage. So how you handle your heart before God, the kind of disciple that you are will massively play into, you know, how you navigate your marriage. Because for the people that sow bountifully into their personal life and really take time to develop the relationship with God year after year after year, they will also reap bountifully in their spiritual life year after year after year. They will have understood the cycles of harvest. They'll learn how to wait, how to persevere, how to trust God, how to say, my times are in your hands, I trust you. And that harvest that we reap through those seasons of following Christ, that kind of provides us for more seed to sow in the next cycle of harvest, in the next planting. And so as we're faithful in that process, we will prosper. And the same cycle holds true in marriage. When you sow bountifully into your marriage, into loving your spouse, into suffering long, bearing with your spouse, you know, staying true, staying loyal, communicating with your spouse, pressing in to just keep sowing seed. Even if you don't see the harvest right away, you will eventually reap. And so seed-bearing couples will be those who enjoy the sheaves of harvest. Really, really important principle. And my wife has pointed out on many occasions and has taught this so well herself that, you know, your marriage, you got to think about your marriage in light of eternity, because marriage is not eternal, but its fruit is. Marriage is not eternal, but its fruit is. We talked in another segment about, you know, the reward seat of Christ, where our lives will be evaluated, and there's certain things that will burn up. You know, I mean, we'll be saved, but certain things in our lives will be burned up, but then other things will kind of stand the test, and will be jewels. They'll be precious stones. They'll be our rewards in life. And so what we're looking to do in our married lives is basically to bear fruit that's going to be eternal. You know, even how we respond to one another, decisions we make day in, day out in a marriage, And this is not to make us, fearful in an unhealthy sort of way, like God's there with a clipboard keeping track of every day. But I think it's clear that he even remembers and takes note of a cup of cold water that we give to somebody. Or like Jesus said, those that you visited in prison, those that you cared for and comforted, it all counts. You're gonna be rewarded for all that. It's a fruitful life. And so the biggest obstacle, of course, is going to be the self life. When I fall into the rut of being driven just to please me, that's when I kind of get into trouble. Great verse in Philippians chapter 2, verse 4. I'm going to read it in the Passion Translation. Abandon every display of selfishness. Possess a greater concern for what happens to others instead of your own interests. Now again, that's easy to do when you're courting, when you're engaged early on. You prefer the other person, what restaurant you want to go to, what activity do you want to do, you serve them, you do things for them. It's kind of easy and you get quick return on it. But once you're into the marriage, once children come along, once you're into different trials together and different situations where you really got to press into the Lord, it's not always that easy. And so we really encourage couples to, as you're enjoying life, as you're enjoying planning for the wedding, or if you're newly married, of course you want to enjoy it, party. And but it's really, really key to also live with eternity in mind. Ecclesiastes 3:11 says, he has put eternity in our hearts. One of my favorite authors and the favorite author of many people is C.S. Lewis. And he wrote a landmark book called Mere Christianity. And one of the things he says in there is that, living this life, as wonderful as it is, really is going to prove to us, when we're Christ-centered living this life, we're going to discover that our earthly pleasures are not the end. They all just basically point to something else that's coming. They're only a copy or a shadow of more that's coming. He says, quote, I must keep alive in myself the desire for my true country, which I shall not find till after death. I must never let it get snowed under or turned aside. I must make it the main object of life to press on to that other country and to help others do the same. End of quote. And Hebrews chapter 11, verse 16 says, but now they desire a better, that is a heavenly country. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. We're all kind of looking for that city. We're all on our way to eternity. We know that we're going to live forever in a glorified body in another state with the Lord. And so that does affect your marriage today. It affects your decisions today. It affects your priorities for today. And the life that you live in your marriage really is very much about your eternity, because you've got a goal, you've got a vision in mind that's way down the road, and you're calibrating your life, as you go through the daily necessities, the daily activities of life, and your marriage and your job, in your church, wherever you function. But deep inside of your soul, eternity is set in there. And there's something that's got you purposed and fixed on eternity. And that will affect the kind of seed that you sow now, today, in your marriage. So your marriage is not eternal. You're not going to be married in heaven. I believe that you will know your spouse. I believe that we will know each other in some way, because we'll be brother and sister in Christ forever. That is eternal. But we're not going to be husband and wife. Jesus made that clear, that we're going to be more like the angels in heaven. So it'll be so glorious. We won't miss it. We won't miss the married life. We'll be transcended into such a higher level of experience. It cannot compare to our best day here on earth. But the fruit of marriage is eternal. So the decisions that you made, and the rewards that you'll get, a lot of those rewards are areas of life that you worked on together with your spouse, things you purposed together in. And that fruit is something that, in that sense, you're going to share forever. So if you give yourself to just continue growing in God, individually and in your marriage relationship, you will have fruit that remains, a heavenly harvest for the ages. So wherever you are today, whether you're about to be married or whether you've been married for a while, I want to encourage you to just continue to pray for fruitfulness. Continue to pray, ask the Lord, what type of seed you are to sow and how you are to sow that seed in life, because it's going to bear fruit that remains forever. And it's so, so worth it to make the sacrifice now, to sow that seed for His glory. God bless you today.